What's up, everyone, and welcome. In order to understand where you are, you need to take a look at where you came from. Now, this is just as true for cybersecurity as it is for finding yourself, let's say, lost in the woods. In this episode, we're going to talk about the top 10 most famous hackers of all time and how some of them got caught. It's not a list of, the top ransomware gangs or country-specific app groups, and some of you actually might not be old enough to remember who these people are, but rest assured, these guys were and are the real deal, and they paved the way for many of today's hackers and attacks, especially considering what these guys achieved at a time when this was all new. While we go through this list, just imagine what havoc these people could have caused with the tools available today.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
I want to start off first with what hacking actually is. Now, computer hacking is the act of identifying and exploiting system and network vulnerabilities in order to obtain unauthorized access to those systems. Now, not all hacking is malicious. There are white hat hackers, and they may work in cybersecurity or as software engineers and testers seeking out vulnerabilities in order to fix them. Black hat hackers, however, operate with malicious intent. That said, there's a large gray area between white hat and black hat, and it's populated by political activists and hackers who actually wear both hats. Hacking costs companies and consumers trillions of dollars every year. According to CPO, by the end of 2021, hacking attacks will cost a total of $6 trillion, which is up from $2 trillion in losses reported in 2019. Now, this is not all about ransomware and ransom payments. It's also about lost productivity, companies being offline and not being able to generate revenues because their systems are basically offline, they're hacked or locked up or what have you. Much of the cybercrime problem stems from the same features of the internet from which we all benefit. Even the most amateur hacker can easily find all the tools they need online at virtually no cost. Now, it took decades of work by now famous hackers to discover critical vulnerabilities and reveal the strategies that establish the foundations of the internet and its free-for-all libertarianism. Now, let's look at the top 10 list of the most notorious hackers of all time. We start off with Kevin Mitnick, aka Condor, Darkside Hacker. Kevin is a seminal figure in American hacking. He got his career started as a teen. In 1981, he was charged with stealing computer manuals from Pacific Bell. In 1982, he hacked the Northern American Defense Command, or also known as NORAD, an achievement that actually inspired the 1983 film War Games. And in 1989, he hacked Digital Equipment Corporation's network and made copies of their software. Because DEC was a leading computer manufacturer at the time, these guys supposed to have all of the knowledge, and this little kid comes in and hacks them and steals the software. This act actually put Mitnick on the map. Mitnick didn't use the access and data he gained during his hacking activity. While it's often assumed that Mitnick once had complete control of Pacific Bell's network, he wasn't looking to profit from the situation. Instead, he wanted to show that it could be done. A warrant for his arrest was issued for the Pacific Bell incident, but he escaped and went into hiding for more than 2 years, during which time he became famous. When he was apprehended, he was charged with many charges of wire fraud and computer fraud and sentenced to prison. And Mitnick eventually embraced White Hat, but in 2014 he founded Mitnick's Absolute Zero-Day Exploit Exchange, which offers unpatched, critical software exploits to the highest bidder. Now, this is according to Wired. Gary McKinnon, aka Solo. Now, a few months after the World Trade Center attacks, a strange message appeared on the U.S. Army computer. "Your security system is crap," it read. "I am Solo. I'll continue to disrupt the highest levels." Basically taunting and teasing them and telling them that their security sucked. Solo scanned thousands of U.S. government machines and discovered glaring security flaws in many of them. Between February 2001 and March 2002, Solo broke into almost 100 PCs within the Army, Navy, Air Force, NASA, and the Department of Defense. This is one guy taking on the Army, Navy, Air Force, and NASA, and the Department of Defense. He surfed around for months copying files and passwords. At one point, he brought down the U.S. Army's entire Washington, D.C. network, taking about 2,000 computers out of service for 3 days. Now, U.S. Attorney Paul McKinnon called his campaign the biggest military computer hack of all time. Now, of course, this is probably before SolarWinds or any of the newer attacks that are going after U.S. governments, but you're talking about way back in 2001. It's 20 years ago. But despite his expertise, Solo didn't cover his tracks very well. He was soon traced to a small apartment in London. In March 2002, the United Kingdom's National High-Tech Crime Unit arrested Gary McKinnon, a quiet 36-year-old Scot with elfin features and Spock-like upswept eyebrows. McKinnon was something if he was able to actually shut down the Washington network of the U.S. military for 24 hours, making the hack the largest military computer hack of all time. Now, the government says that he cost them $700,000 20 years ago. Next up, Albert Gonzalez. Despite the fact that most people have never heard of the famed hacker Albert Gonzalez, his achievements could make Jesse and Frank James blush. Gonzalez was the mastermind behind the largest credit card heist in history, despite the fact he was just 22 years old at the time. Famous hacker Albert Gonzalez was able to resell around 170 million credit card and ATM numbers by deploying a sniffer to collect computer data from internal corporate networks around the world. The Black Hat hacker was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison when he was apprehended. Gonzalez, also known online as Soup Nazi, began his career as a high school student in Miami and finally found a home on the illicit commerce website shadowcrew.com. Gonzalez ended up flipping after his detention and began helping with the government to incriminate scores of his former Shadow Crew associates. Gonzalez facilitated the theft of approximately 200 million accounts from large corporations as an informant. Gonzalez was indicted into the Hackers Hall of Fame in 2005 after staging the world's first serial data breach of credit information. He and his team stole around $256 million from U.S. retailers TJ Maxx alone by employing backdoors created with SQL advancements. Gonzalez's victimization of other people was described as unparalleled. You'll see in a later story that Gonzalez could be credited with the reason as to one guy actually killed himself. Kevin Poulsen, aka Dark Dante. Kevin Poulsen, better known as Dark Dante, rose to fame as a famous hacker after taking over all the phone lines of Los Angeles radio station KISS FM, ensuring that he would be the 102nd caller and win a Porsche 944 S2. When Kevin Poulsen was 17, he used his primitive TRS-80 color computer to hack into the U.S. Department of Defense's ARPANET, the predecessor of the Internet. He wasn't prosecuted at that time because he was a minor. In 1988, when authorities suspected Poulsen had cracked a database on the federal investigation of Ferdinand Marcos, they came after him, and poosh, he disappeared. As a fugitive, Poulsen needled the FBI by hacking federal computers and revealing details of wiretaps on foreign consulates, suspected mobsters, and the American Civil Liberties Union. He also hacked into the details on FBI front companies. At the highest levels of U.S. law enforcement, they started calling him the Hannibal Lecter of computer crime. Next up, Adrian Lamo, aka the Homeless Hacker. Lamo was a gray hat hacker who viewed the rise of the World Wide Web with a mixture of excitement and alarm. He felt that others failed to see the importance of internet security way back in the early days. Lamo would break into corporate computer systems, but he never caused damage to the systems involved. Instead, he would offer to actually fix the security flaws free of charge, and if the flaw wasn't fixed, he would then alert the media. Lamo hoped to be hired by a corporation to attempt to break into systems and test the security, a practice that came to be known as red teaming. However, by the time this practice was common, his felony conviction prevented him from being hired. In December 2001, Lamo was praised by WorldCom, December 2001, for helping to fortify their corporate security. In February 2002, he broke into the internal computer network of the New York Times. He added his name to the internal database of expert sources and used the paper's LexisNexis account to conduct research on high-profile subjects. The New York Times filed a complaint, and a warrant for Lamo's arrest was issued in August 2003, following a 15-month investigation by federal prosecutors in New York. At 10:15 a.m. on September 9th, after spending a few days in hiding, he actually surrendered to the U.S. Marshals in Sacramento, California. Now, other notable things that Lamo did was report Chelsea Manning, then Bradley Manning, to the U.S. Army authorities for leaking hundreds of thousands of classified diplomatic cables. He claimed he had no choice because each one of the hundreds of thousands of documents had the potential to get someone killed. In the end, the Taliban took the info and said they would kill any person of Afghan national person named in the leaked documents. Jonathan James, aka Comrade. Jonathan James was an American hacker who made history as the first juvenile to be sentenced to prison in the United States for cybercrime. James, a well-known hacker, killed himself actually in 2008 with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. James committed a series of intrusions into various systems, including those of Bell South and the Miami-Dade school system. What brought him to the attention of federal authorities, however, was his intrusion into the computers of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, a division of the United States Department of Defense, the primary function of which is to analyze potential threats to the United States of America, both at home and abroad. James later admitted to authorities that he had installed an unauthorized backdoor in a computer server in Dulles, Virginia, which he used to install a sniffer that allowed him to intercept over 3,000 messages passing to and from DTRA employees, along with numerous usernames and passwords of the DTRA employees, including at least 10 on official military computers. It was later revealed that he also obtained the International Space Station source code controlling critical life-sustaining elements, according to NASA. The software supported the International Space Station's physical environment, including control of the temperature and humidity within the living space. James was arrested in 2000 and sentenced to 6 months of home detention, as well as a prohibition on using computers for recreational purposes. Now, in a later incident, James was questioned in connection to the hack of TG Maxx. Again, the Gonzalez story. They knew each other online. Now, on January 17, 2008, the department store chain TJX was the victim of a massive computer systems intrusion that compromised the personal and credit information of millions of customers. The same ring of hackers also committed intrusions to BJ's Wholesale Club, so it goes to Gonzalez, Boston Marketing by Gonzalez, Barnes & Noble by Gonzalez, Sports Authority, Forever 21, DSW, Office Mac, and Dave & Buster's, and reportedly made a millionaire out of the group's ringleader, Albert Gonzalez. So James was questioned, but not charged, not immediately charged. Now, as time went on, he kind of got scared and became convinced that he would be falsely prosecuted in connection to that attack. So he took his gun, he went into his shower, and shot himself in the head. There you have Jonathan James. Now, Mathew, Bevan, and Richard Pryce. So Griffiths Air Force Base, the Defense Information System Agency, and the Korean Atomic Research Institute were among the military networks hacked by the duo of well-known hackers. The duo of black hat hackers almost caused an international issue by dumping carry research into American military networks. So in April 1994, American special agents were waiting patiently for an upcoming attack. They had identified suspicious activity for weeks now, and the unknown enemy was moving across the Pentagon network computers, cracking codes and downloading confidential files. The unknown enemy was Pryce and Bevan. This is April 1994. After one specific breach, so one of the times they broke in and then left in the Pentagon systems, agents were chilled to see that they were trying to access a computer at a nuclear facility somewhere in Korea. So they didn't know if it was North Korea or South Korea. The shocked agents saw a terrible crisis coming. In 1984, the United States was embroiled in intense negotiations with North Korea about its suspected nuclear weapons program. So they immediately went, oh my god, somebody's hacking in, trying to get into a North Korea nuclear facility. Now, if the Koreans detected the attack on their nuclear facility coming from an American air base, that would be major. In the view of the American military, the intruders were the #1 threat to U.S. security. In the end, Pryce, being naive and eager to engage with other hackers via email, he got exploited without knowing it by an informant. So he had contacted some hacker online. That hacker happened to be an informant and exploited him. He gave out his home telephone number to the informant, allowing the informant to then know exactly where he was and picked him up in the UK. So the detectives have caught Pryce, but their main target then was Kuji, which is Mathew Bevan. In June 1996, the computer crime unit went through the mass of information they actually got from Pryce's hard drive, and they actually saw that at the bottom of one file was actually a telephone number for Kuji. So that's how they traced him, and that's how they finally caught him. Ian Murphy. Now, Ian is a controversial figure. There are numerous well-respected professionals that say Ian is a scammer with little to no experience, who fraudulently claimed to have served in the military and worked for the U.S. government in specific security aspects, etc. He's known as Captain Zap. He was once accused of stealing computer equipment from high school students. He basically convinced the high school students to steal the computer equipment, and then he would turn around and resell it and fence it. He claims to be the only hacker ever to be convicted of a crime and go on to become a famous hacker, which is obviously not true. There is a lot of controversy surrounding all of his claims, including, again, his military service. Some claim his career as a master hacker was fabricated in 1986 after he and his unemployed wife decided to form some type of business. However, Captain Zap, along with 3 cohorts, hacked into AT&T's computers and changed their internal clocks. Now, what did this do? Back in the day, long distance, there was a charge for it, but you had certain free times. It also used to be the same with cell phone service. After a certain hour, you got free long distance. So people suddenly received late night discounts in the afternoon, while others who were waiting until, let's say, midnight to use the phone, who would normally get a discount then, they were greeted with hefty bills. For his part in the crime, Murphy was given 1,000 hours of community service and 2.5 years probation, considerably less than what fellow hackers would receive today. Murphy does have a long history of computer and internet frauds. One of his apparent favorite games was two forged email headers sent to send out third-party threat letters. We move on to Astra, which is a strange case. Astra is a Sanskrit word for weapon, and is the pseudonym of a Greek hacker who infiltrated the computers of the French aviation company Dassault Group and stole weapons technology data for over 5 years, so half a decade. Now, Astra differs from the others on this list in that he's never been publicly identified. Nobody knows who he is. However, according to the Daily Mail, some information has been released about Astra, namely that he was apprehended by authorities in 2008, and at that time, he was identified as a 58-year-old Greek mathematician. Reportedly, he had been hacking into the Dassault Group for almost half a decade. During that time, he stole cutting-edge weapons technology software and data about jet fighters and other military-grade aircrafts. He then sold it to 250 individuals around the world. His hacking cost the Dassault Group $360 million in damages. No one knows why his complete identity has never been revealed, but that's just the way this story has played out. Robert Morris. The Morris worm is the first computer worm to be released on the internet. Was created by famous hacker Robert Morris. The worm has the power to slow down computers to the point where they're basically unusable. Morris's computer worm was developed in 1988. What is that, 33 years ago? While he was a graduate student at Cornell University. Now, he didn't release it from Cornell. He actually went over to MIT and released the worm through MIT rather than from Cornell, probably to try to hide his tracks. The worm exploited several vulnerabilities to gain entry to targeted systems, including a hole in the debug mode of the Unix sendmail program, a buffer overflow or overrun hole in the fingered network service, the transitive trust enabled by people setting up the network logins with no password or requirements via remote execution or with remote shell, which is termed REXEC and RSH. In 1989, Morris was indicted for violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. He was the first person to be indicted under this act. In December 1990, he was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, and a fine of $10,050, plus the costs of his supervision. Later in life, the actual programming language, RHTML, is named after him. Other honorable mentions include Michael Kalka. He took over university computers, he pooled their resources, and took down the largest search engine at the time. It was Yahoo, along with Dell, eBay, and Amazon, using a distributed denial of service attack. This happened back in 2000. Eric Taylor, aka Cosmo the God. At just 15, he hacked a Russian cyber gang and also exposed the personal details of Michelle Obama, Kim Kardashian, and Tiger Woods. At 15. Higinio Ocho, aka Wormer, who hacked into at least 4 law enforcement websites. He got caught through actually a picture that his girlfriend was identified in, and then they traced him down. Jeremy Hammond, aka Anarchos. He was responsible for the 2005 Protest Warrior hack. He was sentenced to 10 years in 2013 for hacking the private intelligence company Stratfor. Now, I hope that in this episode you could see that many of the current threats corporations face today have been around for decades. The prevalence and the sophistication has certainly increased, let's say, tenfold at least, but the threats themselves remain the same. So, how do we protect ourselves? Well, first, education. If we don't even know that this stuff exists, then how can we come up with methods and tactics to prevent it? So, of course, keep watching my channel and educating yourself on what you could do to protect yourself, your company, and your family and friends, etc. Second, there are a number of great products coming to market that can help further secure your systems. One such product that I know about can completely block any and all attacks to RDP, SSH, or any other remote control software. Now, I will share it with you as soon as it's ready for launch. With that, I say thanks again for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already, and smash the bell if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Don't forget to ride!